So this is the outline I have. So last week, we stopped on API proxy. So we are going to complete that. What is API proxy? How do we use it? How do we deploy it? Why do we need it? We saw the theoretical part of it. So today we will see hands-on, which is number 2 here. Also, starting the beginning, we a little bit talked about horizontal and vertical scaling and cost considerations. So we are going to talk about what are horizontal and vertical scaling and which one is more cost efficient, which approach should we use when such questions, since they show up in interviews. It is good to know that. And number 3 here, we'll see also a REST connect. So our goal is to create a network of APIs. So if you have different system APIs, how do we connect them in a process API and then have an experience API? So to create a network of APIs, we have to connect them. And one such way to connect APIs is using the REST Connect. So what is REST Connect also? We are going to see. Perfect. So from what we have been working on, we have this. Let me increase the zoom so that we can clearly see it. We have this one, deployed a runtime manager, the W3 schools API. I removed the policies so that we can start from scratch. And last week, we created a proxy, and we said, let's quickly review the theory for proxy. What is endpoint with proxy? And if I move this, so we say an API proxy functions as intermediary between the external applications and the backend server. So here, this is the backend server, or you see here, implementation layer. So this is your actual code that you deploy from Endpoint Studio to Cloud Hub, for example. So that is your backend server. And here you have different applications or clients. So the API proxy is an intermediary layer. And one of the advantages of using an API proxy is it can be used for non-Mule applications as well. We said if we have non-Mule applications and if we want to manage them in any point platform, we have to use an API proxy. So your proxy application is then automatically tracked by API manager. If we don't have API proxy, we use auto discovery. You remember first we created an API in API manager. We added the ID and the client secret and the client ID for auto discovery. But when it is when you have an API proxy, you don't need to add ID. It does the auto discovery itself. The client application or client applications or consumers call the proxy, so they interact with the proxy. These clients, these consumers, they interact with the proxy, and the proxy monitors the requests and validates their appropriate requests, and if they are, it forwards them to the backend. Is what we said. You can read more from the documentation. By the way, I have seen so far, I have studied different programming languages, and most of them are open source. They are free, like Spark, Python, R, and so on. Probably that could be the reason. Their documentation is not as good as MuleSoft. The MuleSoft documentation is really amazing. And they have lots of blog posts also that you can, when you have 5 minutes, for example, you are waiting for someone somewhere, you can just read one article. That way you learn a couple of concepts. They have really nice documentation. Okay, and in the next slide, let me go to the next slide. We have this one, we talked, so in this slide, as you can see, in the proxy, we have API gateway, and we also talked about API gateway. And what we said is the API gateway determines which traffic is allowed to pass through the API to the backend service. Also, it measures the traffic flowing through. logs all transactions, collecting and tracking analytics data, and it applies different policies such as rate limiting, caching, and so on. And the API manager is used to deploy proxies to the gateway. So the gateway is it is a gateway which does the monitoring, log all transactions, and also determines if the traffic is allowed or not. It is the API gateway. First, the API gateway determines which traffic is allowed to pass through, and it forwards it to the proxy, to the backend server. So for the proxy to forward it to the implementation, first the API gateway has to validate it. So this is the theoretical part we saw last time. Now let's see it practically. And also we saw this slide actually that compares when to use basic endpoint versus endpoint with proxy. And basic endpoint, we use basic endpoint when we have resource constraint, because proxy, it uses additional vCores, additional computers, if you will, additional compute resources. So it incurs more cost if it is proxy, whereas the basic endpoint, it is only the actual implementation. So when we have resource usage limitations, or when we want our architecture simple as much as possible, then we use basic endpoint. However, there are cases when we have to use the proxy endpoint. One of them is when we have non-Mule application, as you can see here, non-Mule application. The other time is, so the proxy is more configurable. You can apply more custom policies and configurations. Or if you have also code, but you cannot apply auto-discovery because it is closed code, if you cannot apply auto-discovery to it, then in such cases also we use proxy. And for the WC3 Schools API we just created, let's create a proxy for it and test it. So to create a proxy, what we do, we have this one running, as you can see, in runtime manager. This is runtime manager, and we have this API. And to create a proxy, we go to API manager, and it will create a proxy here. You will see, we will see an additional API here in the runtime manager. So we come here to, let's go to API manager, and we said you can create API by clicking here, add API, either by importing zip file if you have, or clicking add new. And since we have pushed this one to Exchange, we can just import the specification from there to create the proxy. So let me show you my Exchange. This one, we pushed it a couple of weeks in the class. So if you go to Exchange, I have it, this one. So since it is this one, that is it. So we come here, add new. So it says select runtime. We say this is a new one. There is also this one. We'll see what the difference is another time, but for now, we are using this Mule gateway, which is commonly used. And here, so basic endpoint versus endpoint with proxy. Here are their differences. You can see here. If it is basic endpoint, then you have to use auto discovery, as you can see here. Whereas if it is proxy, we don't need to provide ID for auto discovery. So we want this one, deploy a proxy application. This is an intermediate layer. And you can deploy a proxy either to Cloud Hub or to hybrid. We'll see the difference, their difference another time. Let's leave just the defaults here. And okay, if I scroll down here, click next. Oh yeah, here is proxy app name. So we can give it any name. So I will call this, let's say, it is WC3 Schools. I don't want to call it WC3 Schools because this is I don't want people to guess the backend implementation. So let me call it just data proxy or something like that. So click next. Now here it asks me, select the API you want to manage. Is that from, if it is from Exchange, then I see it here. Or if I have the YAML file also, I can click create new API and upload the YAML we said. So this one, here I have from Exchange, so it will import the specifications there. It will auto-populate this one, the asset type, the API version, asset version, and everything. These are just information from Exchange. Leave it as is, click next. You see here now, so one, it says here API instance level. It is good if we put unique level for each instance so that we know which proxy corresponds to which implementation. So this one I will call it, yeah, here I can call it W3 school, W3 schools proxy. This is just level. This one is important. This one, implementation URI. So this one, it needs the URL of the actual implementation, the backend, which is, it is asking for the URL of this one. Give me the URL of this one so that I can create this layer for you, is what it is saying. So if I go to here to runtime manager, let me go to runtime manager, and it is this one. So here I have, I can go to settings also. No, settings, yeah, here, API URL. Here it is. This one, I select it. And if you remember also, we have, this one is, so it is here, and we have API key. So in the interface, in the listener, we have a base path of API. So I will add this one also. Remember to add that path, the base path, otherwise you may encounter errors. So here is the implementation. This is HTTP. It is not, we have not yet seen HTTPS. This is a secure approach. We will see that next. But for HTTP, it's simply HTTP. Then put here, then API. So our implementation, this is the implementation URI. So we are implementing this application. So this is the URL for the backend application. This consumer endpoint is optional. As you can see, this scheme is HTTP. And if it is HTTP, the port is 8081, whereas if it is HTTPS, it is 8082. We'll see that also. So we have under advanced. This one, we can just leave the default for now and click next. And save and deploy. As you can see now, it is going to deploy a proxy called, the name is this data proxy. We will see this one in runtime manager. So save and deploy. Now, if we come here, save and deploy, let's go to runtime manager here. Is this one, let's see, as you can see, it is deploying, it started deploying an application. So this is one, it is creating basically an intermediate layer by deploying to another worker. So this is to another computer, because in Cloud Hub we said each worker can have at most one application. So this is another one, and so the cost will be more in this case when we use an endpoint with proxy. And here, if you come to API manager, we say it creates an for auto discovery. You remember this IP instance ID, we are taking it to the implementation in Endpoint Studio, but now we don't need to do that. It is going to take care of this itself. As you can see now here, the API status is unregistered. Once it is deployed, this one, it will become active by itself. Before, if it is for basic endpoint, for this to be active, we have to take this IP so that API manager and runtime manager can communicate with each other, we said. So for API manager and the runtime manager to communicate, we need that ID. It is this one we said. For auto discovery, we create an API in API manager, take the ID and put it in Endpoint Studio, add the client ID and the client secret of the environment also. And once we deploy it runtime manager, then runtime manager and the API manager can communicate, and the runtime manager can download any policies that we apply in API manager, was what we said. That is for the basic endpoint. But if it is for the API with proxy, it is going to just take care of all of these things itself. So you see here, the proxy URL is here. This is the proxy URL, and this is the implementation URL. So this is this URL is the URL of this one, and this URL is basically the proxy URL. So it is this proxy URL that we have to give to our clients that users should use. So this URL that you see here, this proxy URL in here, it corresponds to URL of this one. Whereas this implementation URL corresponds to the URL of the backend, and we don't share that with people. Okay, so this one, as you can see, the proxy, this data proxy, it has started, so it is working, and we can test it. And if you come here, yeah, first let's wait until this becomes active. Yeah, it was unregistered, but now it is active. So now we can apply policies like we did with the basic endpoint. We can apply automated policies, which are at the environment level, or specific policies to specific applications. So now let's test it. Okay. So to test it, let me go to Postman and just copy this one. You see, this is what I should copy. Remember, it is HTTP. So I come here, HTTP, and oh, I have to remember this. So basically, HTTP, then the URL I copied. Then here, the path and the query parameter, right? So the path is W3 schools, and it expects a query parameter of among the different data sets we have that we specified in the round specification. So let's test it like this. And as you can see, we see data. So this is the proxy rather than the actual, rather than the backend of the implementation. I can check orders. So this, if I give you, if you test it, it should work for you. Also, it should work for everyone because we have not applied any policy to it. Now let's apply simple policy. The policy application is the same, like with the basic endpoint we have been testing with. Just we'll check with one here. Otherwise, it is just the same thing. So we'll not spend time again applying policies. Let's apply policy. Go to policies, add policy, and let's go from the simple one. This one, basic authentication, simple username and password. Click next. So selected basic authentication, simple. Click next. Then I will provide username and password. Test is the username. The password also I will make it test. So if you are testing it, just use test and test for username and password as well. Apply. We said this takes about 20-30 seconds to be applied. We can see that in the logs in the runtime manager. So if I come for this proxy under logs, if I come here, let me see. Okay. Policy applied here, as you can see. Basic authentication policy applied. So now that means now if I try to send a request, it should give me an error saying that I should provide the credentials, username and password. So send. So as you can see, registered authentication is set to HTTP basic authentication, but there was no security context. So we said, in this case, we provide the username and password by going to authorization and from type, basic authentication, then we provide username and password. So the username is test and the password is also test, short password. Yeah, now if I send the request, now again, it should work. Perfect. So this is it. If I make productive, the same thing, it should work, and so on. So this is how we use API proxy, and especially API proxy is useful when we don't have, when the application, well, when we are monitoring non-mule application, or when we want custom configurations and data validations and so on. So these are remember the differences between basic endpoint and endpoint with proxy. For basic endpoint, you have to provide an ID for auto discovery, configure it using auto discovery, how to configure it in Endpoint Studio. So you come here and here under global elements, you click create. That's what we did. Then click out API auto discovery and the other ID. So I have removed it now. That's why you don't see it here, but you have to provide the ID. This ID is what you bring from API manager when you create the ID using basic endpoint and select the main flow, in this case, interface. So that is what we did with basic endpoint, whereas with the proxy, it does everything for us. It creates a proxy, deploys it in a runtime manager, which uses more resources and hence incurs more cost, but it also adds, it creates an ID and it takes care of the auto discovery itself. And if you download this one, this was a runtime manager. So this one, if you download it and import it to Endpoint Studio, you will see it uses an HTTP request for connecting to this API. So what it is doing is it deploys one application here, this data proxy application. It has an HTTP request, and that HTTP request connects with this one. We can quickly see it. So if I click this one and go to settings, so this is the jar file that it has created. You can download it. Simply, if I click it and download it, let me download it to downloaders and go to Endpoint Studio and import it. Let's import it. We just want to understand at a high level how it is working. It's mechanics. So, okay. This is, was it a jar or? Okay, yeah, okay, so I should select import packaged mule application jar. Next, if I come here, go to downloads, it is this one, finish, and okay, so let's see, it is this one. So as you can see, there is an HTTP request. This HTTP request sends a request to the backend implementation, to this one. It sends an HTTP request to this one. And also, if you go to, let me close the other application so that it doesn't confuse you. Let's close this one. Okay, close this one also. I want to close everything. And I want to show the auto discovery configuration for the proxy that it just did by itself. This one also close. Okay. Okay, perfect. So one thing, if you see this request, you see there are configurations here, some configuration. We will understand this more It has query parameters and so on to forward it to our backend. And also, if you go to, where is it? What I just imported? Yeah, it has inbound configuration, outbound configuration, and so on. And if you go see, there is API auto discovery. We didn't do any API auto discovery configuration, but you see here the proxy, it just did this configuration. Also, there are other things also. So you see, it is using property file here, and it did the API auto discovery configuration as well. Because this one is enough for now. We will understand this more as we see how to request or how to connect APIs in our implementation. Like if you have different system APIs, how do you integrate them in your process API? That is what we are going to see. So you will understand that we can use REST Connect, REST HTTP request, or we can use also REST Connect, among others. So we'll see these two also today quickly. So this is it. Let me remove this from here. I don't need it. Okay, perfect. So that is it about API proxy. Let me see what I have. So yeah, we talked about horizontal and vertical scaling. I want you to pay attention here. It is very quick. It will not take much time, but it is very important. And if you don't understand it, it could be confusing, but it is very easy. So let's try to deploy, for example, even just manually a jar file. Let's go to runtime manager and deploy application. If we do like this, and if you select Cloud Hub, what do we see here? We have runtime version, okay, and we have worker size here. We have worker size here, and we have workers here. These workers, it shows count, number of workers, whereas worker size, this is the size of, the size of one worker. And this is, since this is trial version, it says your current subscription allows only one worker per application. So this is just one, we cannot modify it. But from the worker size, we can select different worker sizes. And MuleSoft charges based on vCores. It shows the capacity of the instances or the computers. So we have 0.1 vCores, its memory size is 500 megabyte. We have 0.2 vCores, 1 GB, 1 vCore, 1.5, and so on up to 8. So we have these different vCores. So I have the worker size here in this page. You see, let me make a slideshow. So what do we have here? We have the different worker sizes here, the vCores, and we have their memory here. Actually, when we try to deploy, as you saw, for 0.1 vCores, it shows 500. Let me get back here again. As you can see, for 0.1, it shows 0.1 vCores is 500 megabyte memory. But if you go to the documentation here in their link, it says one, maybe they are planning to upgrade it. Here it says 1 GB for 0.1 vCores. Either way, it has also changed over time. So before, in the previous versions, it was not like this. But remember, what you need to remember is MuleSoft charges based on vCores. So what we see is Cloud Hub deployments run on vCores. MuleSoft license prices are based on non-prod and prod vCores, whether you are using them for production or testing or QA, it doesn't matter. The total vCores that you are using, based on that, they charge you. Now we want to understand. So we have these different worker sizes. We see their memories. And here, this one also, if you have experience with Amazon EC2 instances, you can see what they are called in Amazon. So MuleSoft uses Amazon EC2 instances. So they are called the 500 megabyte, for example, the 0.1 vCore means T2 micro. Actually, this one for like in my case for processing data in data science, since we use large volume of data, these instances, we rarely use them. We use starting from this one, but applications most of the time, they don't process huge data. So that is why they have these small instances. And the other thing is you can have many of them, and you can scale. You can scale horizontally and also vertically. What does it mean? Horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. We have here horizontal scaling means increasing the number of workers. If you have more of this, like 0.1, for example, if you increase from 2.1 vCores to, let's say, 5.1 vCores, you have scaled horizontally. So horizontal scaling means you have this one initially, it is 0.1 vCore. Now, if you have more of it, this is horizontal scaling. Whereas vertical scaling, if you have this one initially, let me make it smaller actually. If you have this one initially, now you want to process larger data like batch processing. So you make it a bigger one. So this is vertical scaling, for example. So horizontal scaling is having more workers. Horizontal scaling, more workers. Whereas vertical scaling is like going downwards here, increasing the worker size. So that's what we see here. And if we see in terms of cost, finish get charged in vCores, let's see, let's compare this one with this one. So if you go from 0.2 vCores to 1 vCore, then you have increased the vCores 5 times, right? 0.2 times 5 is 1. Whereas the memory, it has increased, it has only doubled, right? And that's the reason that you see in most cases, rather than scaling vertically using big computers, where you might even or utilize it when necessary, horizontal scaling and having more of 0.1 or 0.2 vCores, just these ones, having more of 0.1 and 0.2 vCores is more cost efficient. This one. So here, basically, this is responsibility of architects to come up with how to optimize the resources. But you have to understand the difference between horizontal and vertical vCores and which one to use when. You use vertical scaling usually when you cannot scale horizontally, such as when you have large volume data and you are batch processing and you want to just complete it using one worker. So that's one thing that I wanted to cover. That's perfect. We saw API proxy, we tested it. So this is good. I can color green. And also horizontal and vertical scaling and cost considerations. We have seen this also. I guess let me change the color. We have seen this also. Now, let me have a couple of questions here from the practice on the website that they have, and then we are going to cover this one and we'll be done. So I have 2 questions. So I want you to share in the chat your answers. This question says, to avoid hard coding values, a flow uses some property placeholders, and the corresponding values are stored in a configuration file. We have a configuration file. So that rather than hard coding values, like for example, you remember when we were connecting to databases, rather than putting the password, the username, database, and everything in the connection, we were using configuration file. So where does the configuration file's location need to be specified in the Mule application? A flow attribute, B, a global element, C, the POM XML file, D, the Mule artifact JSON file. So let me show you what it is talking about here. Let's see, for example, this one, the Dowdy series schools, we have it here, right? So I want to show you this one. So we said this is best practice to have an interface with API key router, an implementation layer where it is flow referenced in the interface, global configuration that takes care of all configurations, and error handling. If you structure our code this way, it becomes neat, easy to debug and to understand what it is doing and so on. So the question is, we have a configuration file. We have in this one also a configuration file. We have this config file, right? This config file, for example, it has the ID of the API in API manager. That API doesn't exist anymore, but when we were testing with API with basic endpoint with auto discovery, for the auto discovery, we needed this API ID, and we have this ID. So when we configure, when we add auto discovery, we have to give it this ID. So if we go to global here, and if you click add auto discovery, came here, rather than putting the ID, what it was, 1457 something, rather than doing that, we did $, curly braces, API.id, so that it gets it from the configuration. And just give it the flow name here, which is the main flow, this one. If we do this, this is how we set up the API auto discover. However, the question is, it doesn't know where the file is. So where do we specify this file? Where do we tell it that this file, the config.yaml file, that it contains configuration information? Is that in the POM XML or is that in the global element? Okay, good. Perfect. Yeah, so let's quickly see it. So we set it up here in the global elements. We just click create, then global configurations, configuration properties. You see this, we use the configuration properties. Click next. Then where is the file? You can read this one. It says configuration properties references a file with configuration properties. So just click here. If we do this, I see the config YAML. Now it knows. Now it knows when I come here and we get back to auto discovery again. And if I use this one API.id now, it knows where to look for it. It knows that it should check in the config.yaml file. That's the question. That is what the question is talking. I have another question, also a similar one. This one, it says a Mule application contains a global error handler configured to catch any errors. So if you forgot error handling, you can revisit it. I think it is, you may forget it because we have seen lots of concepts. You have to visit the slides and the videos again and again until it sticks. So you have a global error handler. Where must the global error handler be specified so that the global error handler catches all errors from flows without their own error handlers? So if we have a flow without its own error handler, we say it checks global error handler. So the question is, how does it know? You have, let's say, some file. How does it know if it is global error handler or not? How does it know whether it is config file or global error handler or interface or implementation and so on is a question. So nowhere the global error handler is automatically used. B, the POM XML file. C, the configuration properties file. D, a global element. Perfect. You guys are doing good. Okay, this one is also similar. Let me see. From the error handling lessons, we had one of them with global error handler. Yes, we have this one. This one, you can, since it is in GitHub, if you forget it, you can check it there if you don't have it in your machine. So here also global error handler, we add it in the global elements. If I come here, see in the configuration, I should have global error handler. This one. Yeah, this one, global error handler. If you come here, the configuration, you see here, default error handler, global error handler, as you can see here. So we look for global error handler and we tell it which file to use. So basically this one also, it is in the global elements. The answer for both of them is the same, actual global element and a global element for both of them. So we add them in the configurations for the global elements. Okay, perfect. We have seen almost everything. Now quickly, we have 20 minutes. We will spend time on REST Connect. So what is REST Connect? Let's read this question. Then you will, after we do it, you will answer it. I don't expect answers now. First, we will implement it. But the question says, an API specification is defined using GRAML. Okay. What's the next step to create a REST Connect connector from this API specification? A, publish the API specification to Endpoint Exchange. B, implement the API specification using Flow Designer. C, add the specification to a Mule project's source main resources API folder. D, download the API specification and build the interface using API kit. So let's see what REST Connect is. So the question that we are trying to answer here is, let me close this. If you have an API already, one or more APIs, and you want in your other API, you want to connect to them. So, okay, what am I doing? Close. Okay. So basically what we are doing here is, if you go to, let me see to the website, and where was it? It was under the introduction. Here, or this slide looks better. So we are talking about this. So you have one API here. It could be system API. Other system APIs can have data in multiple stores, in multiple data stores. Now we are using a process API. How do you connect to them is a question. And we'll see two ways to do that. So I have REST Connect. To save time, I have created a flow, and I think it is better just to spend time explaining it rather than creating it from scratch again. So we have two ways here. I have two flows. One is to use HTTP request. Another one is to use REST Connect. So we'll see both of them. So let's see, I have a listener here, basically. In this case, I'm not just enriching or adding anything to here. It is just giving me the W3 schools data. But usually you want the process API to do heavy lifting, transform data, combine data from different sources, and so on. But here, we are just testing how do we connect to already existing API. So the path is test one, as you can see here, nothing new in the listener. Here I have an HTTP request. So how are we sending requests to the API? So if you come here, let's modify this one. So we come in the configuration, we have to configure HTTP request configuration. So I have to come to my API, in API manager, I want to use a proxy. So I have to get API manager. I have to get the proxy for this the proxy URL, basically this one. Oh, okay. Oh, I can take it. I can copy it from here. Copy this. This is the host. So in my HTTP request configuration here, I put that for the host. Here, put that. And the port is 80. Now it is not 8081, but rather 80. This one, 80. There is no anything that I should change. Maybe the connection idle timeout, you can increase it. So this is my HTTP request configuration. Then this one, then we have to add the path. So if I click OK, now let me get back to my flow here. In here, so I have added basically the URL, the port. Here I am adding also the path, W3 schools. So by combining the port, the protocol, and the host, it has created this URL. You can also put the URL, the complete URL here. But remember here, what we have done is host is here, port is here, and yeah, this is HTTP. So that's what we have done. And if you come in here, it has created this one. So we want to also to pass query parameters, since it needs query parameter, and you can pass query parameters to HTTP request like we do to the listener. You can pass different attributes. You can pass payload, like what you pass in Postman. So the request, the HTTP request also you can do the same thing. So if I come here, I have query parameters here. Under query parameters, I am passing a query parameter called data, and its value, I'm getting it from attributes.queryparams.data. So this one is kind of coming from the listener, from here, from what will be sent from Postman, for example, when we are testing it. That one, we are creating from that a query parameter, and we are calling it data. You can call it whatever you want as in here. So this is a query parameter I have. Okay. And now, since we have query parameter, what it is going to do is to this URL that you see, it is going to add this query parameter. Or simply we can also do, this one we can also do here, just in the URL, we can also pass, the complete URL, like HTTP / data proxy, the host address, and port is 80, then W3 schools, and you can change this to an expression and concatenate this one with this one. We can also do like this. I have that question mark right here, question mark, concatenate. So that's the query parameter. If you do like this also should work fine. This one. So we can also do like this, but it is better to specify the host support separately so that it takes care of it itself. Okay, so that's what we are doing. We don't need in this case since it will be duplicate. We have done in one of the previous classes, we pass the URL rather than configuring by specifying host port and so on. When we tested the nationalize and genderize APIs, you can check that out, that the projects that we created. Okay, so anyway, when you use HTTP request, you can pass any headers. If you have client ID and client secret, for example, you can pass them in the headers. You can pass also attributes, query parameters, and URI parameters. You just define them here the same way we define them in Postman, for example. So this one, it should give me, when I send a request, it should give me the appropriate data because it has this address here, and also it has this query parameter here. So let me quickly deploy it. Actually, it is running, so we can test it. This is test one, as you can see. So you can see localhost. Do I have a localhost here? No. Okay. Can create a new one. HTTP /localhost 8081. Now it is not W3 schools, rather test one. So basically, what are we doing here? So this flow is going to send a request to this API to this API and get the data. And this API is going to send a request to the backend. So we are testing how to connect. Since we want to create network of different APIs, how do we connect them? One of the ways is using REST Connect. Okay, let's test this. So if I click send, W3 is good. Okay. Unauthorized. Oh, yeah, I have added, we added the, okay, let's remove the, we can't pass the username. Do we have the username and password? Let's add the username and password. But if we add username and password, we have to, that one, we'll do it another time. For now, let's make it simple. And since we don't have much time to talk about that, I will remove the policy, this one. Remove it, that's why it is saying it. No, I don't have permission to access that. Okay, remove. Okay, let's wait a couple of seconds. Let's see the error again. It is saying unauthorized 401. 401 is if it needs username and password, or any of the if it needs client ID, secret ID, username, password, and so on. It says unauthorized. Okay. Let's wait a couple of seconds, and the policy will be removed. Then this one should work. We can check if the policy has been unapplied in the logs. So go here. If I come under logs, here, yes, now it should work. Here you see policy HTTP basic authentication unapplied. It has been removed. So send, yes, now we see data here. As we can see, we have this data here. So that is one way to connect using HTTP request. You can connect APIs. The other one is using REST Connect. This REST, and the question was about REST Connect. I think let's do this one together. I will just remove this one and we do it together. I will remove this also. So the first thing is, if you go to Exchange, let's go to Exchange. And here, if you click it, and if you come, I think here, there is MuleSoft connector. So you can use your assets in Exchange, you can use them as connectors. So how do you do that? You come here and you go to search in Exchange. Then I have logged in basically. So I will search the name. It is W3 schools, as you can see. So if I do W3, it will come here from my account. And then I have just one version here. Do I have one or a couple of them? Let's see. How many versions? Under version 1.x. If I refresh this, okay, yeah, this is one. Oh yeah, I have this one. The latest is 1.0.2. That's what it is showing here. So you just click finish. It will be added here to your palette. Here it comes. Now you can drag and drop it. So if I bring this, here is, you can drag and drop it as a connector. And W3 schools. If you see in the configuration, you have to specify the configuration here. And you have to add the host and the port. The port is 80, like with HTTP request. The same thing with HTTP request. We added the host and the port. Here you have to specify the protocol also. So that's it. We have also here in the, because we have data as a query parameter, now it shows as under general, which data do you want. This is a different data sets we specified in the RAML specification in enum. Because these specifications, categories, customers, employees, and so on. So since we want to pass a query parameter rather than selecting one, which will be just that one whatever query parameter we send, since it will not change. Rather than doing that, we click this fx to make it an expression. And here, just we do attributes dot query parameters dot data. So if we do this, let me start this and run it. Oh, actually, no, should not. I have to add a transform message because this will be in Java format and it will not render in Postman. So add a transform message and transform it to JSON. So come here, just change this to JSON payload. So basically, we have seen two ways to connect to existing APIs: HTTP request and also REST connect. So REST connect, if you have the specification in Exchange, you can just add it to your palette here, use it as a connector, and make the necessary configurations and test it. Okay, so if you come to the question, once it is deployed, we are going to test it. Let's see the question now. An API specification is defined using YAML. What is the next step to create a REST connector from this API specification? A, publish the API specification to Endpoint Exchange. B, implement the API specification using Flow Designer. It says already it has been implemented. So, I mean, this one, okay. I mean, an API specification is defined using a YAML. So, okay, this one, okay, let's read C anyway. C as a specification to Mule project's resources API folder. D, downloads the API specification and builds the interface using the API kit. So, what is their answer? If you have the YAML to use it as an API, as a REST connector, that means here, which is this one. REST connect means this is a REST connect. What do we do? Once we have the YAML specification, which one is answer? Can you share your answers in the chat? Where's the chat? Okay, here. Cool, perfect. Nice, yes. So to use it as a REST connector, the YAML specification, we publish it to Exchange. From Exchange, we can add it to our palette, and it will be a connector and implement the necessary configurations. We will see how to send client ID, client secret, and so on when we have policies also. But this one, as you can see, there isn't any policy. Just the only thing is this one, since the backend, since it needs a query parameter here, and it's called data, we are specifying that here to make it dynamic. So this way, we have seen two ways that help you to connect to applications. Okay. Let me see, this one is deployed. Let's quickly test it. Then I will show you one thing and we'll be done for today. Yeah, just this one, I will change it to test 2. So test 1, it was using this flow, the upper one. Now it will use this lower flow. Test 2. Let me show you the path here. Yeah, you see test 2 is this one, whereas this one is test 1. Perfect. Send request. As you can see, this is dynamic product is all there is employee, because it was employees and so on. So as you can see, it is dynamic. What makes it dynamic is this part, what we have here. Cool. And the other thing before we end for today, what I want to show is, by the way, this one I should have showed you before in the beginning. If you go to access management and lower on the page here, you have subscription. So let me try new features. What are these? Okay. Let me refresh this. Oh, subscription. I don't know why it is blocking me. Okay, yes, under subscription, there is runtime manager. So it shows you your runtime manager subscription. One thing, it shows me when my account will expire. So this one, it will expire on January 9th. You see also the vCores you have for production, sandbox, design, and so on. So if you want to create an environment, let me duplicate this. If you want to create environments, if you go under environments and add environment, all of them should be all of them should be sandboxes, because here everything is 0 except sandboxes. In sandboxes, I have 1 vCores, as you can see here. I can go up to 1. So I can have 0.2, 5.2 vCore, 5 workers of 0.2 vCores each. Or I will, once I use one vCore, then I will not be able to add more, I think, resources for application in sandbox environment. But if you see here, see that this is 0. So if you create an environment in this one, and if you try to deploy, then it fails. If you try to deploy to this one or to this one, it also gives an error message. I think you can test it. It gives an error message when you try to deploy to this one or to this one. So if you want to create different environments for practice purposes, all of them should be sandboxes, basically. So here, test, if I want to create an environment called test, then I should use the sandbox, not production or design, because in the trial version, production or design are not supported. Okay, that's all for today. If you have any questions, I can take one of the questions. Otherwise, this is enough. For today, we have covered everything we wanted to cover. And cool, yeah, I've covered everything, I guess. It's all. Tomorrow we'll not have a class because it's a holiday. And I wish you all happy holidays, happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and also for those of you who celebrate Christmas holidays, happy your first Merry Christmas. And yeah, this is all what I have for today. If you have questions, I can take any question you have. Perfect. So another thing is, so as you can see so far, we have covered lots of content. If you study it, you should be preparing for the test, for the certification. Make sure you are practicing, prepare for the certification, prepare for interviews, talk to people that can give you different advice on preparation, to anyone who can help. I will also try to bring other people who can help with interview preparation and so on. But yeah, we have covered the course content. We'll continue. We have a couple of more things to cover. So if you go to the MuleSoft certification, MuleSoft training, so what we have covered, MuleSoft training, let's see, Titanium, this is license training. There are different trainings, and rather than just having the basic one, we want to continue to have, so that you are at a level similar to someone who has a couple of years of experience, so that when you are asked questions in interviews, you can comfortably answer questions. So this training is, let me see, training, if you go to training, where are their training is? Learning paths, and the developers. We have Endpoint platform development fundamentals. Okay. We have data weave, and we have Endpoint platform development, production ready development practices. We have Endpoint platform development, production ready integrationists, and this one is another certification. So by the time you get here, you have covered all the concept is to be an independent MuleSoft developer who can take care of it from start to finish, developing using best practices in a very optimal way, deploy it in a production environment. You can take care of the application is for a company. So basically, so what we have been learning, initially I was thinking just to cover this one, only the fundamentals. However, that one doesn't make you competitive enough. So that is why I spent more time in this one, data weave also, because data weave is very important. It gives you an edge if you have good data weave command. So that's why I think we spent 10 classes on data weave, 10 or 11, and also we practiced more questionnaires. And we kind of covered from this one and this one, but we will continue a couple of more classes to cover at least without going to depths, some part of this and some part of this. Like we are going to see unit testing, which is very important. Once you write your code, your flows, your application, does it pass tests? Does it behave as expected? So you have to test it, and there is a way called unit testing for doing that. And also, how do you handle security, scalability, and so on in production? How do you deploy? How do you automate deployment using code? And there is what is called Maven. We are going to see that also. However, in parallel, in the meantime, though, you should be taking the certification in most cases. Only this course and a little bit from here is enough. So now you should be taking the first certification, which is this one. This one is the first certification. To be in the MuleSoft developer path, you have two certifications. The one in the bottom is a new one. This one, it started this year, but at least you should be preparing to take this one, the first one, this one. And then while you are interviewing, some of you also, while you are in the job at work, we are going to continue learning this one and this one so that you can feel comfortable and so that you can have complete command of MuleSoft development lifecycle.